Our scripture from tonight is John 1, verses 35 through 51. The next day, John was standing with two of his disciples. When he saw Jesus passing by, he said, "Look, the Lamb of God." The two disciples heard him say this and followed Jesus. When Jesus turned and noticed them following him, he asked them, "What are you looking for?" They said to him, "Rabbi," which means teacher, "where are you staying?" "Come and you'll see," he replied. So they went and saw where he was staying. And they stayed with him that day. It was about 4 p.m. Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, was one of the two who heard John and followed him. He first found his own brother Simon and told him, "We have found the Messiah," which is translated the Christ. And he brought Simon to Jesus. When Jesus saw him, he said, "You are Simon, son of John. You will be called Cephas," which is translated Peter. The next day, Jesus decided to leave for Galilee. He found Philip and told him, "Follow me." Now Philip was from Bethsaida, the hometown of Andrew and Peter. Philip found Nathanael and told him, "We have found the one Moses wrote about in the law, and so did the prophets, Jesus the son of Joseph from Nazareth." "Can anything good come out of Nazareth?" Nathanael asked him. "Come and see," Philip answered. Then Jesus saw Nathanael coming toward him and said about him, "Here truly is an Israelite, in whom there is no deceit." "How do you know me?" Nathanael asked. "Before Philip called you, when you were under the fig tree, I saw you," Jesus answered. "Rabbi," Nathanael replied, "you are the Son of God. You are the King of Israel." Jesus responded to him, "Do you believe because I told you I saw you under the fig tree? You will see greater things than this." Then he said, "Truly I tell you, you will see heaven opened and the angels of God ascending and descending on the Son of Man."
A few years back, I began to get very interested in photography. So I had always dabbled in videography, but I was working at our sending church and they had just really good camera equipment. And so I was able to dabble in photography. And so when I first started shooting photography, I would shoot in fully auto mode. And so I just pull out the camera, put it in auto mode and start taking pictures. And it did okay, but as I learned more, I was told, hey, if you really want to reach your full potential, you need to shoot in manual mode. So you need to be able to control all the different factors that go into photography. And so I'm learning about this, and it's great to shoot in full manual mode because you have full control of everything that you're doing, but you also have a much higher potential of messing things up, right? You might take a shot and then you go and look at it later and it's fully blown out and just white, or it's too dark, one or the other, right? And so I'm trying to learn more about it. So I'm watching YouTube videos, I'm reading blog posts, trying to get my mind around the science of photography. What is ISO? What is aperture? What is shutter speed? I'd heard about all these things, but up to that point, I just took photos on my phone like everybody else, right? Which is also fully automatic mode. And so as I'm learning this, I don't know if you've ever learned something new, but you feel like absolutely overwhelmed. You feel like you have no clue what's going on. You're kind of just fumbling along. And this is how I felt. And so I'm learning all this information, but I still don't really even understand it. And there was a point where I was like, forget it. Like, I'm just going to go do it. And so I got my hands on the camera and I just started messing around, taking pictures. And then what happened is, as I had more experience with the camera, having hands-on experience, the things that I had learned then began to kind of fall into place and make sense. And so this is like, I don't know if you guys experience this when you learn something new, but we feel like we're just fumbling forward and we just have to kind of take that first step. Right? So I'm learning more about coffee, and how to make coffee. Jason over here buys me this thing. Like, hey, use this. And he's telling me about, well, you got to wet the filter before. And I'm like, what does that matter? And he's like, no, it's important. And I'm like, okay, sure. Right? And then as you learn more, though, you begin to be that guy that's teaching other people. You begin to, like, the puzzle pieces start to fit and things start to make sense. Now, when someone asks me about getting into photography, like, one of the main things, like, I'll give them a quick tutorial I'll talk to them about, the three main things to control lighting. But then at that point, I say, hey, shoot in manual mode. It's going to be frustrating at first. You're going to be tempted to just go back to auto mode, but just do it, put the work in, and I promise you everything I'm telling you will eventually make sense. And in many ways, this is what it's like to follow Jesus. You might hear a little bit about this man named Jesus and some things that he's accomplished, right? You might hear statements like, lose your life to find it. And you're kind of like, wait, what does that mean, right? Or you hear statements like, my kingdom is not of this age. Or you hear about the upside down kingdom ethics of Jesus. And maybe you're a little intrigued, but to be honest, you feel a little confused. Like, this seems like a lot. Like, I don't know what first step to take. I remember I've dealt with people as they first begin to experience Jesus. Truly experience him, not just some facts about him, but begin to experience him. And they're like, hey, I'm confused. Like, I'm intrigued, but what do we mean when we talk about the upside down kingdom? Like, that doesn't make sense to me. And I don't always have the answers, but I just tell them, like, keep leaning in. And I promise you, like, Jesus will be faithful to bring you along this journey. See, the beauty of following Jesus is that as we take that first step of the journey, as we act in faith on the little bit that we know, we don't have to have it all together, but as we walk that path of discipleship, the things that he say begin to actually make sense. Things that once were confusing to you, things that maybe you even bucked up against and didn't like to hear them, you begin to say, oh, that actually makes sense. And that's what's great about the invitation to follow Jesus. And you have to get this right away as we're going to talk about today, what it means to follow Jesus. You don't have to have it all figured out. You do not have to be an expert. And as a matter of fact, if you think you are, there's going to be problem. It's okay to fumble along and to just take those steps of faith and trust Jesus, because he's the one that will finish the work that he started in you. He's the one that's going to bring to pass the identity that he speaks over you when you first begin to follow him and surrender to him. And that's what we're going to see in our time together today. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Joel McCarty. And as Kevin said, I have the privilege of serving as one of the pastors here at New Eden Church, specifically the pastor for preaching and oversight. It's an honor and a joy to gather with you week after week. And I especially want to thank those of you that are visiting with us tonight. We say this, we don't embarrass anybody, but we do hope that you feel welcome because we always say, like, Jesus welcomed us into his midst, even when we were strangers. And so we hope and pray that we can do the same for you as well. As you've already seen, we're continuing our series through the book of John. Today, we're going to be finishing up the first chapter. So if you want to follow along in your scripture notebooks or in your copy of the scriptures, we'll also have it on the screen. The Gospel of John is the fourth book of the New Testament. If you're trying to find it in your copy of the scriptures, like I said, we're going to be in John chapter 1, verses 35 through 51, the end of the chapter. And so in our text today, before we begin to observe the life and teachings of Jesus, which will happen next week, we're going to get to dive into his life and teachings. But before we do that, John, the beloved disciple, the one who authors this book, he wants to invite us in to come and experience Jesus for ourselves. And he's going to do this by telling us in the scriptures about some disciples of Jesus and their first steps to follow Jesus. So he intentionally is placing this story right here because he wants to invite you to place yourself in the role of the disciples and is asking you, what will you do with this Jesus? In the text, we're going to hear about this theme of looking or seeing a lot. This is intentional. You're going to see the word 11 different times. You're going to see look, see, or saw, or some form of those words. And so in this, what John, our author, is doing is he is inviting us to look for ourselves and gaze deeply on the face of Jesus, the Messiah, because he knows that that is the path to transformation. It's not looking at yourself, not looking at your own sin, but looking deep into the face of Jesus, and that is what transforms. And so whether you're here today and you've been following Jesus for years, or maybe you're exploring and seeking what it means to follow him for the first time, maybe a little unsure, not knowing what to expect, my invitation to you during our time together today is to just simply look. Just come and see, not at me, not at New Eden Church, not at anything we have to offer, but look and gaze on Jesus. And you might be surprised at what you find. So let's dive in and see how it unfolds. Look at John chapter 1, verse 35, and we're going to read through verse 37. The next day, John was standing with two of his disciples. So this is John the Baptist, not the John that wrote this. So John the Baptist is standing with two of his disciples. And when he saw Jesus passing by, he said, "Look, the Lamb of God." The two disciples heard him say this and followed Jesus. So if you were here last week, Kevin preached and did a great job. You remember we saw John the Baptist was pointing to Jesus as the final, once and for all, sacrificial Lamb of God. He was coming to take away the entire sin of the world and do away with the entire old covenant sacrificial system because he was the fulfillment of that. And so right on the heels of this declaration by John the Baptist, we find our story today. The text tells us it was the next day. So John the Baptist has two of his disciples. They've been following him and he says, "Hey, look, the Jesus I've been telling you about, the Messiah that I've been talking about this whole time, that's him." And so these two disciples are like, "Well, great, let's go follow him." And I love that John was perfectly okay with that. That's the one he was pointing to. And so they go follow this Jesus. Now, we don't know exactly what this looked like. The way the text reads, it seems like it might have been a little awkward. Like they're just kind of behind. They don't exactly know what to say or how to approach him. Maybe they're a little nervous. And so they're just kind of like stalking him a little bit from a distance, you know. But then what happens is Jesus turns around, he notices them, and he asks them a question. Look at verse 37. I love the way Jesus engaged with people. Sorry, look at verse 38. When Jesus turned and noticed them following him, he asked them, "What are you looking for?" They said to him, "Rabbi," which means teacher, "where are you?" So Jesus asked them this question, "What are you looking for?" And again, we see this key word of look. We saw it when John said, "Hey, look, the Lamb of God I was talking about," and now we see it again here. And I love this question because this question of what are you looking for, we probably don't ask enough when we think about our journey of following Jesus, but I think it's a very helpful one. See, there were some who came to Jesus simply to be physically fed. Right? They like the fact, he tells them this later, like, you just want some food, right? Some more bread and fish. I fed you guys before. There were others who came looking for earthly power and control. They just wanted to be next to, celebrity status. Others came looking to trap him, to try to discredit his message. But to those who came with humble hearts, and they simply wanted freedom and rest from the rat race of this world, Jesus was always ready and willing to receive. And so they respond to his question with a question of their own, which can seem a little weird, but they respond, "Where are you staying?" Again, it seems a little weird in our context, but them saying they wanted to know where Jesus was staying was basically a way of them letting Jesus know, "Hey, we want to know more. Like, we want to spend more time with you." Like us saying, "Hey, do y'all want to grab lunch? I'd love to grab coffee sometime, but let's catch up." I want to hear more. They're intrigued by Jesus. Maybe even stay the night with him, learn what he was all about. And so they asked Jesus where he was staying. As they do this, the text here in the Greek has the idea of asking him where he was abiding. And I love this because our author later will pick back up this theme in John 15, where he talks about us abiding in Christ spiritually. And so John, as he often does, he uses many layers here to get across a theological point. And right away, we see that the invitation to follow Jesus is an invitation to abide with him. It's an invitation into a new life. It's not just some new law. It's not kind of tacking him on to what you already want to do with your life and your dreams and your plans and saying, "Hey, Jesus, I want you to bless these for me." No, it is an invitation to lay aside your own plans and dreams and to simply abide with him. This is a helpful reminder for us that Jesus is not some genie in a bottle. He's not here to simply make you feel good about yourself. He's not here to give you some self-confidence as you go into the work week so you can just go and kill it Monday through Saturday at whatever you want to do. Jesus shows up as the king of the world. But here's the beauty of this. As we come to him with no pretense, with honesty and humility, he is more than happy to invite us into his life and into his presence. And that's exactly what happens here. Look at verse 39. Jesus didn't have to do this. The creator of the universe. And what does he say to these two strangers who walk up? He says, "Come and you'll see." So they went and saw where he was staying. They stayed with him that day. It was about 4 p.m. So most likely they stayed the night. It was too late to go back to their home. So Jesus says, "Come and see." Again, this is one of the repeated themes you're going to see in this passage, this invitation to simply come and see for yourself, to take that first step. Not to have it all figured out. Jesus didn't quiz them to make sure they were, good enough, make sure they were strong enough, powerful enough, influential enough to be a part of his kingdom. He just said, hey, you want to come? Come and see for yourself. Later, Philip is going to tell Nathanael the same thing in verse 46. He's going to say, hey, come and see for yourself, when Nathanael pushed back a little bit. And I love this because it doesn't matter what you've done or who you are, or maybe what kind of doubts you carry. We're going to see Nathanael have his doubts, that this still is the invitation for all of us today to simply come and see. And I don't mean just at the beginning of your journey of discipleship. Like, it is a lifelong process of us refixing our eyes and coming and just sitting at the feet of Jesus. And remembering that it's not about just doing a bunch of stuff and getting busy, but it's abiding in Christ and letting the works that we do flow from that, not to try to earn that or to try to find identity in that. See, our natural response before we take steps of faith is often to try to figure it all out. Like, the Spirit calls us to obey and follow him into unknown territory, and we just want to go make a pros and cons list. Right? Like, we're like, let's figure this out. Like, let's weigh this. Let's make sure we hedge our bets here. Let's kind of have a backup plan just in case God really doesn't know what he's doing, right? And that might be great advice as you're like figuring out what trade school or college to go to, or maybe what house to buy. But when it comes to following Jesus, the invitation is to simply act like a child on what you know to be true, to take that step further into the abiding life of Jesus. And this isn't me saying that we ignore logic or reality, but what it does mean is that we don't try to become God and take control for ourselves. We don't try to become all-knowing and try to figure it out. We trust him to be that because he is God, not us. And so we just walk on this journey of discipleship hand in hand with him. And here's the thing, as we do that, as we talked about earlier, things actually begin to make sense. As we believe, as we enter into the life of Jesus, as we stay the night, so to speak, the puzzle pieces begin to fit. His sayings and teachings about the kingdom begin to actually shape our life and our worldview, and things of this age begin to fall away. And we begin to believe even more fully than we did at first that he actually is who he claims he is. And I'm not saying we do this perfectly. Like, we're going to see these same disciples. They're going to take this first step, and guess what they're going to do? Mess it up royally. Like, they're going to mess it up time and time and time again. But as we just take these small steps of faith to come and see, we begin to actually be formed into the image of the one we are abiding in because of his work on our life. See, as Jesus responded in grace to these disciples, invited them into his life to come and see, it actually changed these two men. As they walked, they would have talked about life and Jesus' mission and what he was up to in this world. And it was enough for Andrew, we're told that he's one of the two, to believe in him enough to go tell other people, hey, we have found the long-awaited Messiah. I mean, half a night, right? Maybe at most. He's like, hey, like, I've seen enough to know, like, other people got to get in on it. See, as this happens, as we come and see, we can't help but then go and bring. We want to get out and say, hey, you've got to see this for yourself. And I can try to tell you, I can try to explain it. And I love this about Andrew because he had only been with them like half a night. He didn't go take some soul winning class. Or he didn't go like take some, helpful tips on how to figure this out and, the Romans road or something. I'm not saying those things are all bad. What I'm saying is, like, he just simply said, hey, like, let me tell you my experience and what this guy has done for me and what he told me. And then I need you to go see for yourself. And I'm just going to bring you to him. Look at John 1:40 through 42. Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, was one of the two who heard John and followed him. He first found his own brother Simon and told him, we have found the Messiah, which is translated the Christ. And he brought Simon to Jesus. So Andrew is identified with his brother Simon Peter, who would have been one of the pillars of the church at the time, which is why he kind of gets this recognition. But he brings him to Jesus. And I love that Andrew is smart enough to know that just like John the Baptist, who he was a disciple of, his primary job was simply to point people to Jesus. Kevin talks about this a lot, and he says, we're just kind of picking up the corner of the mat and taking the lame man to Jesus, referencing the story where the friends just said, hey, we got to get this guy to Jesus. Like, we'll break the wall down, we'll do whatever we got to do, but ultimately only Jesus can make this lame man walk, right? And like, that's our job. He wanted Peter to experience it for himself. We don't know for sure. The way the Greek reads in verse 43, the way it reads in our English translation, it's as if Jesus went and found Philip. The way the Greek reads, some commentators believe that Andrew was the one who went and found Philip, and then Jesus told him to follow him. But either way, like, the passage has this pattern of people going and bringing after they come and see. And so it's the natural pattern. Look at John 1:45. After Philip is brought to Jesus, now he turns around and it says, Philip found Nathanael and told him, we have found the one Moses wrote about in the law, and so did the prophets, Jesus, the son of Joseph from Nazareth. So this pattern continues as Philip finds Nathanael. See, when we experience the work of Jesus, this is the natural response. When we come and see, we begin to go and bring others to see this for themselves. And when we saw this last week, so I'm not going to repreach it, but this is a great reminder that it's not up to us to follow Jesus for people. We can't make that decision for others. We can't force that to happen. We can't change hearts. We trust Jesus to do that. And this is beautiful, though, because it means that we just get to play a part. But the pressure's not on us. Like, it is his divine work, but he says, hey, I'm going to invite you into this. Now, I want you to think about this for a minute. This is Jesus, the creator of the universe, God made flesh, coming to bring the greatest news ever to mankind. And he grabs some dudes that have spent 4 hours with him, and he entrusts them to go tell and start this message to spread. Like, no, like, I would be like, let's take a 4-year seminary degree. Like, let's make sure you really don't mess this up. And then maybe I'll entrust you with this message. That's not what Jesus does. He doesn't find the most elite, the most well-spoken, the most powerful. Instead, and we're going to see this throughout the book, whether it be the woman at the well or Mary Magdalene at the tomb, he finds the most unpredictable, ordinary men and women. And after one conversation, they're already playing a part in spreading the good news of this kingdom. And what a grace, because it hasn't changed. To this day, he still uses ordinary men and women through ordinary, everyday means to declare and display an extraordinary message. Like, we, New Eden Church, those of us that are here as followers of Jesus, you get to play a part. This is crazy. So they come and see, they go and bring. And lastly, we see that they begin to know the King. See, each of these who follow Jesus begin to actually believe that he was the fulfillment of what they had waited for. And I love it because each of these men kind of saw Jesus fulfilling a different angle of prophecy, but it was all true. Just following Jesus is like a kaleidoscope. You see his glory and then you get other glimpses of it. You see him as the Lamb, you see him as the King, you see him as the true and final prophet. And let me say this to you, that whatever you're longing for in life, whether you know it or not, Jesus is what you're looking for. Like, you might think you're looking for your kids to turn out well. You might think you're looking for that perfect spouse to make everything okay, or a better job, or a better salary. But I'm telling you, the thing you're wanting is only found in Jesus. All those other things can point to him. I'm not saying that all of those desires in and of themselves are bad, but ultimately Jesus is the one who fulfills it. In verse 36, John the Baptist declares Jesus as the Lamb of God. In verse 41, Andrew declares him as the anointed one, the Messiah. Verse 45, Philip tells Nathanael that Jesus was the one written about way back in the book of Moses and in the prophets. And in verse 49, Nathanael's going to declare Jesus as the Son of God, the true King of Israel. These men came and saw Jesus for themselves. This was more than just a passing glance or a glimpse, right? Like, that's not what's going on here. Like, they're gazing deep on Jesus. And they're not just following him because he's a good teacher and they want some better tips about how to live their life, and live successfully. That's not what's going on. Like, they've come face to face with Jesus, the Messiah, and they've realized that he is the fulfillment of all of history, all this stuff we've been studying, all of our longings. They realize that. And what our author is inviting us to do is to enter into that story, to know the King in an intimate and real way, not just some facts about him, not so you can pass a theology test. That's not what's going on. This is intimate. And so to explore this a little more, let's look at the way Nathanael comes to Jesus. Half of this passage, as far as word count, is this Nathanael story, this event of Nathanael coming to Jesus and the conversation that is kind of the culmination of all these disciples that we've seen begun to follow Jesus. So Philip comes to Nathanael. He tells him, hey, like we found the one we've been looking for, the one written in the law and the prophets. And then he identifies him. He identifies him as Jesus, the son of Joseph, would have been a common way of identifying him through his earthly father. And so Nathanael seems a little bit doubtful. Like up to this point, people are like, yeah, let's go. But here in this story, Nathanael is a little bit doubtful, and he responds in a snarky way. Look at verse 46. He says, can anything good come out of Nazareth? Now, we don't know if this is just a good-natured, snarky response, right? That might be something I would say. If someone said the Messiah was, coming from Falkville, I might be like, can anything good come from Falkville, right? Like, and actually, if you don't live in Decatur, most people say that about Decatur, so I just pick something else because we still do that today where we judge other places because, it makes us feel better about ourselves, which isn't a good thing, by the way. But so it could have just been a snarky response because Nazareth was insignificant, or it could have come from a place of deep hatred and prejudice. I mean, it could have been that deep. We don't really know. Any guess is conjecture. But we do know that Nathanael, at best, right, saw Nazareth as this insignificant town where nothing good could come from, right? Or worse, like that's the best case scenario. And again, we experience it today, right? Like we might talk about them dang Yankees from liberal New York, right? And then I hear other people talk about, the redneck, podunk, backwards towns here in Alabama, right? And so wherever you're at, you might judge other people. Whatever Nathanael's heart was, he thought it was ridiculous that anything good could come from Nazareth. And I love this, first of all, because it reminds us that Jesus, in the most insignificant way possible, enters into this world in a very upside down way, into a culture and a place that was seemingly insignificant. But from that birth into calling these men and women who were seemingly insignificant, he turned the entire world upside down. And God can use anything and anyone from anywhere, even Decatur, right? Or Falkville or whatever. So Nathanael makes this remark to Philip. And I love Philip. Like he doesn't jump all over him and, try to get onto him. He just simply says, come and see. Like, fine, you don't believe it? Just come and see for yourself. And so Nathanael does, to his credit. He comes to Jesus, and let's see what Jesus says in verse 47. Then Jesus saw Nathanael coming toward him and said about him, here truly is an Israelite in whom there is no deceit. So we're told that Jesus sees Nathanael. And this word in the Greek means that he paid attention to him. He gave him time. It wasn't just a passing glance. He concerned himself with him. And I love this because before Nathanael ever looked intently on the Messiah and saw him for who he was, Jesus saw him for who he was. He calls him this Israelite in whom there is no deceit. Now, this is an interesting remark. There's a lot going on here. We're going to see that there's some theological undertones going on, but in the immediate context, we don't know exactly what Jesus was doing. He could have been being sarcastic, like kind of snarky back, because Jesus did do that sometimes. Nathanael was just talking about him behind his back, running his birthplace down. He could have just been being snarky back. It could be, though, that Jesus is actually commending him for his honesty. And I tend to think that's what's going on here. Like Nathanael doesn't think very highly of people from Nazareth, but he's at least not putting on a pretense, right? So that's us here in the South, right? We just smile and be very hospitable to people that we like, right? Yeah, oh, bless their heart, while we trash them and gossip about them, right? Nathanael doesn't do this. Like he just comes out and says, like, can anything good come from Nazareth? And so maybe Jesus is just commending him for at least his honesty. I think y'all got a little bothered by that. I was just half joking, So anyways, I love the South and hospitality is a good thing. So, y'all were all staring at me like I'm gonna get in trouble. What I love about this though is Nathanael replies, look at verse 48. He says, how do you know me? So he makes a claim about his life, an Israelite in whom there's no deceit. Nathanael says, how do you even know me? Like, how can you make this claim about me when we've never even met. And so then Jesus tells him, hey, I saw you. Before Philip ever even called you, I saw you under the fig tree. Now, we don't know exactly what this reference to the fig tree is. Some scholars say that's where it was a common place for men to study the Torah. And so he could have been referencing that I am the fulfillment of what you were studying. Again, that's just conjecture. But what we do know is that this is a specific detail that Jesus could not have known without supernatural means. We don't know if there's more to the conversation, but the way John records it is that this statement alone was enough to convince Nathanael. And so he exclaims in the next verse that truly you are the Son of God and the King of. See, as we begin to know the King, and I love this, we don't always get it right away. Sometimes we give ourselves a lot of credit for making this decision to follow Jesus. But as we embark on this journey of life together with him, one thing that we learn is that he saw us long before we saw him. We learn that our identity is one that comes from his plans for us long before they are ever actualized in real life. We don't know if Jesus honestly thought he was an honest man. Either way, I know that Jesus was going to form that in him. Back in verse 42, we kind of skimmed past this, but when Jesus met Simon, he renamed him Cephas, or Peter, which meant rock. And towards the end of the book, we're going to see the significance of what that meant. But as we go through the book, you're going to see Peter is anything but a rock. He's fickle, he's selfish, he's brash. But Jesus was speaking to him what he knew he would be because of the work of Jesus. As our author John invites us to come and know this King, as we go and bring others to know this King, we can be encouraged that this King has seen us long before we saw him, that we can only see him because he chose to come in flesh and make himself known. We can only go and bring others because he first came to us and brought us to his Father. And this is the beauty of following Jesus. He doesn't ask us to do something that he's not willing to do first. He doesn't ask us to go somewhere that he has not been. See, we love because he first loved us. And so as we talk about the invitation to follow this Jesus, let me encourage you, don't turn this into some spiritual formula. This is an invitation into a life, not a new law to obey. Jesus' response to Nathanael's declaration in verses 50 and 51 will bring this all together for us. Look at it. And Nathanael replies, you're the King of Israel, you're the Son of Man, you're the Son of God, So Jesus responds to him, do you believe because I told you I saw you under the fig tree? I know you think that was cool, but you're going to see greater things than this. And he said, truly, I tell you, you will see heaven opened and the angels of God ascending and descending on the Son of Man. So Jesus turns to all of them and he tells them, this is just the beginning. In verse 51, the word you here is plural. It should be translated y'all for us, right? He says, hey, y'all are going to see the Son of God, or the heavens open and the angels of God ascending and descending on the Son of Man. He's like, hey, I know you feel like you've seen a lot in your short time, but there's a lot more where that came from. And I love it because it's that's the journey of following Jesus. We get our feet in the water and get a little wet. We're like, oh, Jesus is amazing. He's like, just wait. You have no idea what's in store. There's more glory to see. And so this is John inviting us into the book because we're about to see Jesus' glory on display. And so he's inviting you into this. He says that they are going to see the heavens open and the angels of God ascending and descending on the Son of Man. Now, this whole passage we've been reading is rich with symbolism, reminding the readers of the story of the nation of Israel. This is all on purpose. So to understand this comment and the beauty of it, we need to go back to before Israel was ever even a nation. There's a story in Genesis chapter 28 about a patriarch of the nation of Israel, a man named Jacob. He was the grandson of Abraham. He was the one through whom God chose to bring forth the nation of Israel. Jacob had a troubled life. The name Jacob itself meant deceiver, one in whom there was guile, and he lived up to his name, if you know his story. But if you remember the story, God gave him a new identity and changed his name to Israel, and spoke a new identity over him, not on the basis of Jacob's work, because there's no way that was true. He was a deceiver, but purely on the basis of grace. And eventually this man who was renamed to Israel would bear the sons that would become the names of the 12 tribes of the nation of Israel. Earlier in our story, when Jesus called Nathanael an Israelite in whom there was no deceit, he was clearly placing in the minds of these men the story of Jacob. They would have heard it immediately. He's saying that Nathanael, you're not full of deceit like Jacob was before his name was changed to Israel. Some commentators have paraphrased it. Hey, here truly is one who is all Israel and no Jacob. Was this Jesus speaking over Nathanael what was spoken so long ago over Jacob, that in Christ he would become pure and right? And we don't know, but we do know that Jesus wants to remind us of this story about Jacob for a reason. We do know in the same story that Jesus gives Peter a new name and a new identity. And he reminds them of the man Jacob who was given a new identity. One of the main stories that these readers knew about Jacob was this story of one night right after he was running from deceiving his brother. He had gotten in trouble. And so he's running away from God. He is running away from his own troubles. He's trying to avoid getting killed. And he lays down to sleep. So he's not doing anything. He's not doing any kind of work. He's just laying there. And as he sleeps, he has this divine dream. Look at Genesis 28. It'll be on the screen for you, verse 12. And he dreamed, so Jacob's dreaming, a stairway was set on the ground. Some of you as kids might have heard this as Jacob's ladder. Stairway is the better translation, but this is the story. A stairway or ladder was set on the ground with its top reaching the sky, and God's angels were going up and down on it, ascending and descending. The Lord was standing there beside him, saying, I am the Lord, the God of your father Abraham and the God of Isaac. I'll give you and your offspring the land on which you are lying. And he goes on to tell him, the reason I'm giving you this is because all peoples are going to be blessed through you. All nations are going to come to me through you. And then in verse 16, Jacob wakes up from this dream where God reiterates this covenant over him when he was at the most unworthy place of his life and the most unworthy person. And Jacob just wakes up and explodes in worship and says, surely the Lord is in this place. And I didn't know it. He was afraid and said, what an awesome place this is. This is none other than the house of God. This is the gate of heaven. And he names the place Bethel, which means house of God. This is the story that these disciples would have heard and would have thought of the moment that Jesus says, you're going to see the heavens open and the angels ascending and descending on the Son of Man. And Jesus places himself in the story in the place of the stairway. And what Jesus is saying is this: I am the stairway to heaven. I am the true house of God. Don't look back to some story from ancient Israel wanting to go back there, because I am here. I am the true gate into God's presence. And this is amazing. So it's incredible enough to be invited into knowing the King. And it's even more incredible that the King sees us and knows us before we even see him. But the reality is, without the work of Jesus, that's actually terrifying. Jesus knowing you, think about it. Every idle thought, every evil comment, every wicked deed. But in Christ, who is now the gate of heaven, we have hope to not just be known by this King, but to be loved. Knowing you at your worst. Just like when God met Jacob. That is the worst part of his life, the deceiver. And God meets him there and promises him, based on his covenant, that he's going to fulfill that. And this is what happens in Jesus. And when Jesus is saying you're going to see the heavens open, the angels of God ascending and descending, most likely he's talking about his death, burial, resurrection, and ascension. Just the work that he's going to accomplish. Jesus was the true Israelite in whom there was not an ounce of deceit, and he lived this perfect life. And because of that, he has the power to not only know all of our sin, but to conquer it and beat it. And because of this, there's hope for us. And in the cross, he enters into what should have been ours, and he remains faithful and steadfast. There's no doubt like Nathanael had. There's no questioning his Father. He remains faithful and dies the death that should have been ours. And as he dies, what happens? The veil of the temple, the veil of the house of God is torn in two and released to go out into the entire world to all who believe, because he's the true house of God, the true temple. He's done the work. He's the staircase to God. And he proves it in the resurrection when he overcomes sin. He shows us the biggest sign. Like, we're going to see a lot of signs that build up to the final sign, which is Jesus rising from the grave and beating death, hell, and Satan. And when he walks out of the tomb, he provides access for all. And you know what he says? Come and see the empty tomb. When Mary Magdalene sees it, you know what he says? Go and tell others that I am risen. And what does he tell his disciples he's going to do? He's going to go prepare a place for them. This little nugget in the story when he says, yeah, where are you staying? Come abide with me. That's just a foreshadowing of when we get to abide with Jesus for all eternity. And there will be no night because he will be the light. He's going to prepare us a place in the dwelling place of God. And he's going to bring that back to set it up in the new creation. And we'll be one with God forever. He is the true stairway, the true access to God, to the Father. But what do you have to do? Simply believe. It doesn't mean you won't have doubts. Like, I'm not saying get it all figured out, know enough doctrine, know enough theology. Simply trust and believe. We don't have to be like I feel when I'm learning something new, that I've got to figure it all out so I don't look stupid when I try. Guess what? In following Jesus, we're all going to look stupid sometimes, but Jesus doesn't care. Like, the whole point is that he's not, and he's done the work. So we're just surrendering and hanging on to his coattails while we go for a ride. Simply act on what you know. I don't care where you're at. None of us, like, if you're spiritually mature in here, you know you're not a super Christian. If you think you're a super Christian, you're not as spiritually mature as you think you are. None of us are super Christians. We're all just trying to point each other to Jesus. That's why we need each other. That's why we need community, because we're pointing each other to Jesus. Take those steps of faith, doubting though you may be, fumbling along, and just walk with him. Abide, stay the night, listen, learn, and he'll take care of the rest. Accepting the invitation doesn't require you having it all figured out. It simply requires admitting that you don't. And as you take these steps of faith, based on what you know, I promise you, I can say this, not because of me, but because of Jesus. You're going to see greater things than you ever thought you would. I'm not saying there won't be pain or suffering or persecution. An invitation into the life of Jesus. Jesus was honest about this. We're honest about this. It's an invitation into all of it, including his suffering and his death. But on the other side of death, because of the work of Jesus, is resurrection. And so now death is no longer something to fear. It's simply a tool used by God to produce resurrection glory beyond what you could ever dream about. And I don't just mean physical death. I mean like the death of your dreams, of your goals, of what you wanted in life, the hopes you had. But as those things die, things begin to make sense and you begin to find what truly matters. Maybe we can begin to see what it means to lose our life so we can find it. And so for those of you who've never taken this first step, like, this is the invitation to just come and see and surrender. And I promise you, it will make sense. It will all be worth it in the end. And for those of us who've committed our lives to this Jesus, may we be reminded of the simple faith that we so often lose sight of. We complicate it and try to take discipleship and take control of it and make it about a list so we can control it and say that we finally measured up and did a good job. Like, let that go and trust Jesus to form you into the identity he has spoken over you, that you are sons and daughters of the King. Don't move ahead of him. Don't lag behind him. Learn the unforced rhythms of grace that he offers. He's calling us to an abiding life, not a new law. Rejoice, as he tells them later, not that you can do some amazing things in his name, but rather that your name is written in the Lamb's book of life. That means that more important than knowing the King, though that's super important, is that the King knows you, and rest in that. And as that happens, you will not be able to help but invite others and bring them in to see this good news for themselves. So may our church be a people who consistently come and see, go and bring and know the King.